Tommy's hiding under his desk. I'm not sure who that is, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough at some point in time. Obey versus Team Dignitas. This is a spicy set here, Taco.
This is the set that is definitely going to determine a lot of outcomes. Like Tom just mentioned, this could potentially be the land securing set for Team Dignitas as well. And I mean, it is going to be all out on the line, I think, between these two teams, and they are going to want to really duke this one out.
Definitely a rough one here. 11 points for Dignitas, 10 for Obey coming into this one. You get 3 points if you're 2-0, 1 point each if you split, which would still see Dignitas top of the shop for the time being. Circuit will be the first pick here after Hunbats and Scardy with a bans from Obey.
And then Doth coming out on the side of Team Dignitas in response. And the Fafnir, that is a pick that I love seeing every single time on the side of Team Dignitas.
The Fafnir or the Toth?
The Fafnir. The Fafnir especially, because it just fits into Trix's play style so
Get out of position,
well.
Be aggressive.
He loves that.
And then survive.
I mean, we talked with him last on Thursday when he played, and he talked about the Fafnir and how much he loves this pick because it allows him to do everything that he loves to do. And so giving him a pick that he feels so comfortable on in such an important set, I mean, anything is possible, I really feel.
Completely agree. Vulcan and Amaterasu for Obey. Susano for Dignitas as well. That will go towards Cubo Fred more than likely in the jungle. They're banning away Hercules here. I guess they're expecting that Amaterasu will be support from Milsey, which we've seen quite a few times before.
It wouldn't surprise me to see Emilzy try and flex that Amaterasu once again into the support role. But on top of that, I really do like the composition coming out from Obey as well. It fits into their play style where they like being able to have the option to go into the back line with Twig. And that's what we can see with the Circuit. But at the same time, they also have their group-oriented positioning between the Amaterasu, the Vulcan, and now the Xing 10. So their team fight has a lot of potential as well, and it's excellent at executing where they can get in your face and really distract and allow Twig, or permit Twig that freedom to find himself inside the backline and pick up a pick or two, which is important, especially when you're facing off a draft such as Dignitas with a Thoth and Susanoo.
Well, more than likely, it's going to be Sobek versus Xington in the solo lane here, I'm expecting, which means we're kind of looking for the Hunter here from Dignitas. Where will we end up seeing our boy Arkil go with Anher banned against him as well? Options are a little bit more limited.
I mean, Scotty's not off the table either, and I was going to say potentially for the Hu Yi, but the Apollo coming through strong for Arkil, and that's a pretty potent duo lane that they have coming through with the Sobek and the Apollo facing off. Should that be an Amaterasu and a Ram?
I was going to say, do you reckon it's Fafnir solo then, or Sobek solo?
It'd be Sobek solo. Excuse me.
So you meant
it's
Fafnir
the
Apollo,
Fafnir. Yeah, the Fafnir.
I got you.
Yeah, just a slip of the tongue, to say the least.
To say the least.
I had to throw it in there.
Just in case people didn't realize it. Well, Obey going to be blue team here, starting off the bottom side of your map and the left-hand side of your spectator UI. Pretty Prime in the mid lane once again playing Vulcan, one of his go-tos, and you can see that he started Aegis this game. I guess he's not too worried about CC this game, Taco. He's more worried about burst potential that could come out from his opposition.
Rightfully so as well, because really the only early game CC that Dignitas has on their side is the Fafnir, should he try to play a much more aggressive kind of style that we're accustomed to seeing Trix on.
And you talk about aggression. Well, look at what's going on the map. Support has come mid lane from Dignitas, and Arkil is trying to defend his own buffs on the left-hand side. No wave has been taken by Obey in the duo lane yet, which means if Arkil wants to walk up and get some of that, he's going to be in a bit of an awkward spot, but he's going to lose the purple before this one. Obey trying to do their own speed against Trix Tank, and now the collapsing solo lane of Cubo Fred and Variety looking to strip that one away, and they will do so, giving that one over to Cubo Fred and denying more experience for Obey.
And that pressure from Dignitas, that's exactly what you want to see with this draft, especially considering that Sobek isn't necessarily the most aggressive solo laner in the world. He's not really one that you're accustomed to seeing opt for the invade route, but with 4 members strong, it's very easy for him to secure the enemy team's blue buff, and that's exactly what you want as a Sobek. And for Xing 10 to be deprived of so much mana, that is going to make the laning phase incredibly difficult for him.
You talk about being deprived. Well, look at poor old Arkil. Just hit level 2 now, had the purple and red buff stripped away from Dignitas' jungle on the left-hand side. So for now, we've taken a mirror image once again where Obey, they've focused their attention to duo on the left-hand side of the map. Dignitas, however, more of their attention on the right-hand side.
Obey placing so much emphasis onto Ataraxia is never a bad idea. We've seen him have excellent displays on this ROM, and especially considering how much of a carry factor Rom can be should you utilize his kit effectively and get his build online. Ataraxia can start chunking pretty early on, and Apollo already has some difficulties laning against him. So for Arkil to be deprived so well in the dual lane, that's a very strong fighting factor for Obey.
I mean, the good news is for Arkil, he's getting solo farm over there with Trixtank's not being there, so it's a very similar situation to what Eager playstyle is, where they leave Zapman alone in the duo lane just to farm up, and it can kind of allow you to keep pace eventually. You just get behind early.
The concerning factor here, though, is that Arkil is opting for the Devourer's Gauntlet Rush, which we're accustomed to seeing now on these attack speed hunters, but Ataraxia, with his build, I wouldn't really expect him to opt for a lifesteal option. He has not been liking the lifesteal too much.
Just be careful, because this is Ataraxia we're talking about here. Like, of all the people to talk about builds-wise, Ataraxia is not necessarily the one you want to try and call out what he's going to do, because you might see Brawler's Beat Stick next time. I'm just saying. He's
been loving this super aggressive boxing build for Rom, though, where he likes to build into boots, into the Iqbal, and then a Fatalis, and the Chins, or an Executioner. He just wants attack speed items as much as possible, and when you opt for an attack speed oriented build against an Apollo, sure, Apollo has his steroid, but it's really hard to try and counter box the enemy hunter, because he just is applying so much pressure onto you, and despite having sustain, you can't sustain that much damage early on, considering that you need at least 2 or 3 items following up that Devourer's Gauntlets before you're really able to output any damage with it.
Well, the game is still even between the two teams right now. No first blood, and with them both stripping away each side's jungle, you can see that Obey have got a bit of a better hand of it in terms of experience. Not by a lot, but that's more better sharing of these camps overall, Taco, than anything else for the time being. But the rest of the team of Dignitas will keep this pretty much even for now. It's going to be a very interesting one as time goes on.
And Maniac actually slightly ahead of Variety despite having lost his blue buff from the start of the game.
Twig actually going to come to the right-hand side right now, looking for Variety. He doesn't recognize this is going on because Millsy's here too. The extra mobility could come into play. 3 ultimates versus 1. Gets cancelled out of the dash. Forced to ult early. He's going to eat a lot of damage for that. He won't get stunned in place, but never smile at a crocodile. Or in this case, you might as well if you're Jing 10, because you get a nice gank from your team. Bad news is, Millsy got the kill. Or is that bad news?
Not bad news in the slightest for Amaterasu at this stage of the game to pick up the first blood, because as an Amaterasu, as a warrior support, you're ideally looking for that early to mid-game snowball that can help your team carry off into that later stage of the game. So when Emilzy is already starting to hit that spike, and as a warrior, he's dealing a decent amount of damage initially, and we saw the burst potential that he had with the combination of the Xing 10 and Circuit ultimates. And
dancing with Zeros here while the team are doing the Oracles and looking at the Gold Fury. Zeros is trying to ignore Captain Twig to the best of his ability, but he'll still go down as well. The Oracles went the way of Obey. Now they're going to pull the Gold Fury again, already at half health. Trixtank is here though with the ultimate that could cause a couple of problems for them, but there's a Vulcan ult to try and secure. Still the Gold Fury lives, and Obey will get it. Trixtank now out of mana, however, forced to meditate to get in range and go on Prime again. Prime has no beads, remember, just an Aegis to buy him a moment's notice. He'll get a bit of a distance from Arkil for now. Meanwhile, Ataraxia, different story. He won't get distance away from Cuvo Fred, who's one of the most mobile assassins in the game.
Neither Prime or Ataraxia able to escape from Dignitas, and that was an excellent chase by Dig. Trixtank immediately recognizing we didn't secure the objective, but all of them are low, pop my meditate, and just go in, and that's exactly what Dignitas needed to do. It's an excellent response from them, and now they get to strip the jungle of Obey. And honestly, that kind of goes in Dignitas' favor.
I was going to say, was that even now, or is that still,
it's pretty
favoring
even.
one team?
Gold disparity, there's still about a 1.2k gold lead on the side of Obey, but losing your jungle, and then on top of that, Dignitas being able to establish lane pressure with lanes that aren't supposed to have pressure at this stage of the game, that's a win every time.
Well, Variety forced out of his wave for a second. They're a little bit worried about rotations coming in from Captain Twig, and rightfully so, because Twig is hanging around this right-hand side. Blue buff is available for Obey to try and steal. Trixtank, though, here on defense, going to get kissed before he can get the hammer off there. You heard the noise, but it won't be hit for now. Emilzy round the back looking to steal away the blue buff. Blue buff is dropped down, and immediately Emilzy committing onto Zeros here. Nice investment onto Zeros, dropping him down to half health. And no follow-up from Obey, though, but they'll walk away.
That damage from the Amaterasu, though, and he's got tank boots. at that, and he's still chunking incredibly hard.
I mean, we say that, but then Warriors in solo lane generally build tanky. The only normal item we see tank damage-wise is Warrior Tabby, right? It's the only difference.
Warrior Tabby makes a pretty big difference in comparison to Reinforced Greaves. That's a pretty substantial power difference between the 25 and 40.
2-2, 7 minutes in. And everything going pretty well for both teams, realistically. I mean, Obey getting the first early goal. Fury, Team Dignitas do have a game that scales better as time goes on, just by the way of Fafnir alone, not necessarily the fact they've got a Toph or, you know, the likes of a Susano in the jungle. It's going to be very good as the game goes on for both teams.
At the same time, even though Dignitas, you would think that it favors them, considering they have, they would probably have the better frontline potential between two hard guardians in comparison to the warrior and then a guardian on the side of Obey. But Vulcan, Serket, and Braum, the damage factors on between those three characters is a lot more consistent and a bit more potent than that of Team Dignitas. So Dignitas is probably going to be looking more for the group-oriented fights, whilst Obey is
looking for picks.
They want to invest a lot more into picks at this point.
Well, Oracle's going to go the way of Obey. Right-hand side, the Elementals have Spawn being contested at the moment. Only 2 members of Obey around, though. Arkill taking a boxing match against Ataraxia. Doesn't realize Emilzy behind him, especially with the mini-map. With the minions, we gave him vision. Luckily enough, though, the beads and the ultimate will get him back to the safety of his own half of the map for now. But he did invest his beads and his ultimate to defend against that aggression. And
Ataraxia is very aware of Arkill and how aggressive Arkill likes to play in these Hunter matchups. So if he keeps baiting him a couple more times around that corner, or even just halfway up the lane, is really all that he needs for Emilzy or even Twig potentially to find Arkill off guard. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Twig hanging around that mid-dual lane jungle area a bit more often, just with an Apollo having the beads and his ultimate down. That is prime picking for a Serket.
Well, red buffs are spawning on both sides right now. The Obey's one was up a little bit earlier than that of Dignitas for now. The right-hand side is completely dead. And Ataraxia, you said he likes going for this penetration build, this attack speed pen build with Rama as well, gone for the Iqval already. We spoke about this in the last set we just casted, Taka, where the Devour's Gauntlets and Apollo is very good, but you can go for boxing potential to try and make sure that trade's even, and he can't lifesteal back to full health against you.
Exactly, and with Ataraxia opting for this Iqval build, not only does he have boxing potential with the Apollo to try and outdamage him before he can sustain it back up, but he's also going to be dealing a decent bit of damage to the Susanoo and Thoth as well, and could potentially even find himself chunking away at Trixtank's health if he's not careful.
And Trixtank here building towards what could be Shield of Regrowth for Thebes. Shield of Regrowth on to a Fafnir does work pretty well as well, obviously with the extra mobility, because you get a heal every time you use your Coerce that can allow you to be a little bit more mobile around the map. Chase potential is a little bit better as he returns to the dual lane to find Emilzy, who's level 10, some of that down to farming, some of that down to the first blood that's giving him that small lead against the support opposition.
And Arkill being able to suck up all of that solo lane farm, that is exactly what you'd want for an Apollo, because the more pressure that he's able to get into this lane, the better off he'll be in the long run, considering that Dignitas could always have that pocket backdooring mentality where if Arkill looks to pressure a lane, that forces out at least one member of Obey to try and rotate over to deter him, because like we saw in the last set actually with Emilito and adapting in them, they were pressuring out Flurry every single time, and the Apollo trying to ensure that he wasn't able to rotate in, and that's exactly what they would be forced into doing here with Arkill. Don't allow the Apollo to just free farm split push, because that's how you lose all your objectives, and it disorients the map so much against your favor.
Well, if you take energy out of the equation in Europe, these are the big two teams that you'd probably be looking towards this season. Dignitas with Variety, which we've not really touched on yet, but Variety is against his former team for the first time since the World Championships here, Obey Alliance, and they've got their new solo laner Maniac, who's been around the scene before. These two have gone at it. Maniac used to have a pretty good time up against Variety in the earlier on days, but I'm pretty sure Variety will be the one that will have his way with Maniac a little bit more these days as well, and it's the first real talking point we've seen these two in action against each other.
Maniac was having a little bit of fun earlier on as well when that gank came through initially, had a little bit of the VEL coming through.
Mind games, and that's kind of what you do a lot in the solo lane. It's mainly solo laners that do it as well here, Taco.
Exactly, and I mean, that's what you want to be doing, and Variety looking for the rotation, but unable to help his team, and it looks like Captain Twig could be trying to engage on the Kivo, but Pretty safe disengage all around.
Didn't look like there was really there for Cuvo Fred more often than I think they were looking for the Tricks tank pick, but the silence didn't connect from Emilzy on that Amaterasu, so everybody just falls back to safety. Captain Twig's ultimate now being on cooldown means that Obey will probably fall back for a moment or two before they have that available again.
And classic Tricks tank play right there, just chasing down Maniac, delaying the backfire a little bit.
Talaria boots as well, remember. You want to get those Talaria procs online if you can, just for that extra gold spike.
And Ataraxia, Emilzy just doing what they can, just farming away pretty happily. Ataraxia opting, looking like he's going to be building either into the Executioner or the Chins. I would probably say the Chins just because Team Dignitas do have 2 Guardians on their side, and so you can expect that one of them, or potentially even both of them, are going to be building health at some point in time, which would really make Chins a little bit more effective for a build.
And you talk about the Chins there being effective against health, and Thieves has been picked up by Tricks tank there, so it does give health and a bit of protections from both sides as well. So we'll be chipped down a little bit harder now that the Chins is slowly going to come online from Ataraxia as well. The Gold Fury has been up for a little while now since the first one went the way of Obey, but this is a dance. This is the classic EU dancer Taco of positioning, tactical, not many kills going on, all waiting for the other one to make a mistake and try and capitalize on it.
And Ataraxia does need to be really careful in this lane because now it's starting to make a difference that he doesn't have the lifesteal sustain, unlike Arkhill, who's got the Devils online, and he's almost done building either an Executioner or a Chins himself. And once he gets either of those attack speed items online, it'll provide him with a lot of counterboxing potential to the ROM. And even with an Ickful, Arkhill should typically be finding himself on the upper hand as long as he's landing his autos.
I mentioned Shield of Regrowth for a Fafnir, but Shield of Regrowth on an Amaterasu is a thing we're seeing right now, and it does allow a decent usage of it, changing stance with your healing aura to your damage aura. It will allow it to go a lot quicker. On top of the fact that meditation can also be used to proc Shield of Regrowth. He's got a couple of ways of doing that if he really needs to.
Mobility is certainly exactly what you want on an Amaterasu, and with the way that Emilzy has been playing this Ama especially, he has been all over the map already, finding himself not only in the solo lane, but the duo lane more often than not.
Man fight, and Cuvo Freddy's not winning that man fight. Twig, though, aggressing onto the Oracles instead. Ataraxia in the sky, looking to snipe out Cuvo. Tricks tank, though, going to med him to make sure he stays topped up. Obey will get the Oracles off the back of that little engagement, though, so it's not all doom and gloom for Captain Twig and Obey.
That was the warm-up. That was the zoning snipes by Ataraxia falling through there. Didn't connect, but made sure that he was at least dancing the entire time to not permit him. And man, Variety really wanted that flick onto Maniac.
So that was a med bait by Variety there. He was under the tower, backing with no mana. Maniac is known to go aggressive and stop people's backs. I've seen him do it for years gone by. But Variety was ready for him then. The bad news is he didn't find the pluck. If he did, it could have been a bit of a different story there, where Maniac could have been in a lot more trouble, but he dashed away. Talk about dashing. Twig dashes in onto Zeros, and he will get a good ultimate off too. The Aegis has been forced, and the damage is good from the Meatball Mariana that Pretty Prime has produced. Round the corner comes Ataraxia to pick up Arkhill, and the Dragon that is Tricks tank is forced away. Sobek round the back, coming to try and collapse, but instead he's pinned in place by Maniac with a nice up-down combo. Juggled again by the Meatball on the backfire as well. Maniac looking to clean up the kill onto Sobek. No meditate this time as the back bait didn't work earlier on. Instead, Obey clean up 3 and could turn their attention to the Gold Fury.
And the worst part about all of this is that with the Vulcan on the side of Obey, the objective clear is so strong already, and that Gold Fury is just falling immediately, only further extending the gold lead from Obey.
Red buff stolen away there as well by Obey. Tricks tank trying to hang around to stop them from taking it, but instead Ataraxia will still be able to pick it up and walk back to the safety of his own half of the map, and that just stretches the lead now to around 2,500 gold, closer towards 3, I should say, with how this game's gone. And this was just more Obey finding small weaknesses and opportunities to go aggressive.
But the problem there is once Obey start to get the small engaged victories, and then they just begin snowballing that incredibly well. And that was the beauty of their draft, really coming together all at once. And Pretty Prime, shoutouts to him especially with that almost max range Vulcanal and then the max range Meatball nearly landing almost perfectly. And I mean, when you can trust the teammate to be that mechanically gifted, it's pretty important, because There's a lot of trust and confidence being placed into the members of Obey amongst each other, and just knowing that Pretty Prime's going to be landing his kit every time.
Yeah,
and
that helps.
Twig ulting off the Aegis, and there was just no way for Zeros to really survive in that engagement. And Arkill following right after.
The big thing we've got to see change in Dignitas' comp here is that they have to protect against Captain Twig a little bit more. When he's coming into these engagements, they have to peel him off immediately, because if they don't, he's going to get the burst off, and by the time they've turned their attention towards this circuit, the rest of the team has already collapsed into apply more pressure.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that the person who's meant to be peeling him is not necessarily Sobek, not at this stage of the game, because Variety is more focused on just trying to maintain Maniac and not let the Xing tank get out of control. But most of this is falling onto Trix tank at this point in time. And Trix tank on that Fafnir, should he miss an ability at any point in time, it just completely opens up the lineup of Dignitas. And so they have to ensure that Trix is really the one who's on point here. And as a Fafnir being the sole member pretty much responsible for handling this circuit, that can be, it's a lot of pressure.
Well, one of the reasons we saw Fafnir start to fall from grace a little bit wasn't because he was not a good guard, it's just that his abilities were a little bit more difficult to hit, and he didn't have very good situations to be in. Against the circuit, for example, a disarm, it'll stop you procking your passive as a circuit, but not the damage from a Death Bay, not the damage from the Cobra's Kiss, not the damage from the ultimate either. It's not going to allow you to reduce that at all. And if you hit the hammer, great, but it's a lot more tricky to hit than you think. Bottle Demon, taken, goes the way of Obey. Maniac was thinking about wrapping around the back. Dignitas just a little bit too late there. They were just trying to force them off it without actually fighting.
Dignitas didn't want to force the engage there, considering that they were still a little bit out of position, and Obey were in a favorable trade since they have the Vulcan, but Portal Demon just absolutely destroyed.
And in the early game, it is actually low in health. It scales as time goes on, so it makes it worthwhile. The Oracle camp contested between the two teams, and it gets split evenly. Dignitas, however, on the defensive, being forced out through their own jungle now. Emilzi's been able to allow this mobility for Ataraxia and for Pretty Prime to get around the map just a little bit quicker.
It's going to be incredibly annoying for Dignitas too once Ataraxia finishes off that Fatalis, because with the Amaterasu passive buffing his team's movement speed and the Fatalis, it'll be difficult for Dig to run away from Obey, and that's another thing that Obey has that Dignitas kind of lacks to a sense, is heavy mobility. I mean, you've got the Circuit to compensate for the Susanoo, but you have Xing 10 for lockdown potential onto anybody who expends their dash too soon, the Thoth and Apollo, for instance, and then you have the Amaterasu buff. Vulcan's pretty solid with his movement speed and passive.
Trig's able to find that hammer onto Emilzi, and Emilzi does a good job of clearing the wave there to stop Dignitas trying to split push that tier 1 on the left-hand side. When an opportunity was left available for them, Ataraxia just returned back to Vase to finish off his Fatalis here. Didn't go for the chins that we expected, Taco. Went for the Executioner for the penetration.
Executioner isn't an awful item either, though, considering that they will be building physical protections, and so it is a strong item as well for securing these kills.
Captain Twig, what's he up to? He's going on Cuvo Fred one more time, trying to fight him in the jungle, but Trix Tank this time is here to help out his brother on his team. The Medjais was used, however, by Captain Twig, which we've not had a chance to talk about yet, but that Medjais is going to stop one of those hard CCs, which is something that Dignitas are kind of lacking a little bit here, is hard CC.
And it's a perfect pickup for Twig on a Circuit this early on, because now he has a lot more freedom to just jump into that backline whenever he pleases. And Dignitas are constantly going to be on the tip of their toes because of it.
Well, tip of the toes is Arkill right now, realizing there's an opportunity again in the left-hand side. He will get the tier 1 tower this time round, answering back some of the gold that Obey have had the lead on for a while. Looking to back before Emilzi turns up, but sad enough, he will have to use the ultimate to get back to the safety of his own half of the map, and then recall to base.
That's kind of what you're expecting, though, as an Apollo. I mean, anytime you secure a T1 tower, you can anticipate that at least 1 or 2 members are going to be rotating over, and Obey were starting to linger off into that dual lane side. Arkill securing the wave, that's one of those moments where not only does he get the extra farm, but he also gets a chance to see what Obey are doing in response to him picking up that T1 tower. So had they not started to rotate over, he probably would have kept pressuring onto the T2, and that would have opened up the map for Dignitas. But at this point in time, I wouldn't be surprised to see Arkill staying more on that left-hand side.
Variety forced to ult defensively on the right-hand side there. Maniac traded ult for that one. And Twig might come in again now, knowing that's down, but luckily enough, Trix tanks around this area will force the Medjais a second time onto Captain Twig, forcing back to the safety of the base to continue buying up items for now as well. This game, it's normally by 20 minutes in, Taco would be like, all right, we're in team fight stage, we're in mid-game now. But this is, I'd still class this as early game based on how the teams have been playing it.
And I would also say that this is going a little bit more in Obey's favor, the pacing of the game, because any time that they are looking for engagements, it's been based around Obey. Like, they are the ones who are initiating everything, and Dignitas are more so just trying to respond than anything else. And even after they respond, I mean, it just seems like Obey always has the upper hand.
Well, games have been relatively quicker this split compared to last split. 27 minutes is the average game time in Europe and North America right now for how long the Pro League games last. But 21 minutes in, this has no chance of slowing down for the time being, or at least speeding up and getting to that point. Maniac at the back, going to get a nice ultimate off. Pull in Variety, who still has his available, but it was a little bit too late used. The Earthshaker hits Zeros, and Zeros getting hit by a Millsy and Ataraxia at the same time. The Aegis keeps him up, but Maniac wants to kill. His former teammate is barreling down for in the mid lane. Instead, Maniac still got tower aggro, and it looks like Cuvo may be able to pick him up. Trickstank credit for the kill, as Arkia was boxing both Ataraxia and Prime. Prime getting the final blow on that one. It's a 2-for-1 exchange. Solo laner for Solo and Hunter.
Arkiel nearly had the better end of that trade as well, forcing Ataraxia to pop his Aegis. Otherwise, he would have fallen victim to the sustain and auto attack passive from the Apollo. And now that opens up Gold Fury for Obey, and Gold lead is still manageable for Dignitas to try and fight into, but these fights are getting more and more questionable on the side of Team Dignitas.
It's been all three Gold Furies Obey have managed to find after a little team fight, or just after one. You know, it's allowed them to just get this small lead. That's just down to the Gold Furies for me. The team fight's working out in their favor, where they've forced one extra man out, has allowed them to keep getting them, and that's the only difference in this game so far.
And the extra man forced out there was Zeros. He had to expend his Aegis, and it was just questionable all around. And Millsy could be in a little bit of trouble here. Not necessarily.
Not really. I mean,
he's not taking too much damage, but if he were to try and linger around that Portal Demon, he just wants to provide presence, so Dignitas can't retaliate securing that Portal Demon.
And actually make sure the Portal Demon stays alive for now. Dignitas have a lot of sentry wards placed down around this Portal Demon, but they start to be cleared out by Obey now, who come back with a couple of their own. Maniac will make sure they own the Portal Demon for a minute. That won't last long, though, as most of the team of Dignitas are around to start looking at sentries themselves eventually when they get a couple more online. Only Arkil has one in his inventory right now.
And Dignitas, this is where the Portal Demon Fire Giant dance would probably start to pick up, because Obey, they have a lot of their items online. Ataraxia did end up building into that Chins. He just picked it up a little bit later than what we're accustomed to seeing.
Well, with realizing Arkill's on the left-hand side of the map, Obey are trying to commit a little bit more to the Portal Demon, and Millsy can tag this up for days. Just him and the Vulcan turret can keep Dignitas' attention. Arkill has stayed in the duo lane right now, though, and he's looking towards a tier 2, forcing Prime back. Only his tower remains here for Prime to help out at this team fight that is around the Portal Demon. Down to 15%. Final Judgment missed from Zeros. The reset was good. The Portal Demon goes the way of Obey. The tier 2 on the left goes the way of Dignitas. And the fight is now on. And it's tough being chased down again by a Millsy.
And even without the Vulcan Secure coming through, QO Fred being popped with Circuit Ultimate. Ataraxia on the run, though, from Variety.
But he gets away to the sky in time, turns his attention towards Cuvo. 3 shots, 2 of those connect. But overall, it was Portal Demon for tier 2. Nothing else really happens until now. And Millsy onto Zeros again. Ultimate invested, stunning Zeros into an awkward spot. Zeros now wrapped into the Rage and Steel Ultimate. Pulls him back into danger, but now the Aegis comes out, and Zeros invested a lot into. Still alive, and Millsy has not much left to really get away from this. Will dash back to the safety with the silence. Variety zones away Ataraxia, who went very deep for that, and luckily his Aegis was up too. All members still alive.
And Arkill wanting to give chase, but the perfect 2 from Captain Twig, deterring him because of the madness. And oh man, that had Arkill been able to maintain auto-attacking off the creep wave, he would have certainly chased down the entirety of Obey.
I tell you what, that Portal Demon being up for those few extra seconds there, that could have been a different story, because Dignitas were very healthy there, Taco. They could have looked for the Fire Giant if the Portal Demon's window was not available. They could have gone straight for that.
And I mean, it would have still been a really risky play for Dignitas to try and pressure out that Fire Giant, because Obey are a fairly mobile team. They could have certainly responded fast enough, I think, before Dignitas could have really bursted down that FG enough to secure it safely.
And right now, what both teams will be doing is communicating with each other internally, going, okay, what did you say get burned? What have you got available for use now. Is your ultimate up? What are your beads like? Are they down? And right now, Zeros is like, guys, I need 80 plus seconds of nothing happening to me so I can try and get back on track, because I've got my ultimate, but that's not going to help me if they try and dive me with a circuit again.
No, Zeros has been having a bad time trying to get away from Captain Twig on the circuit, and really just the entire draft of Obey. I mean, we saw how deep Ataraxia went even into that T2 tower, just no fear whatsoever, rolling into the tower, trying to pick up something, then having to disengage almost immediately after. That is pretty risky play, but they wanted that Thoth kill.
Well, it looks like Obey want the Fire Giant, or at least a fight around it right now. Maniac coming from mid lane, Arkill on the left-hand side. Looks like he should be using the So Beautiful right now to get across the skies, I should say. Variety zoning away Ataraxia, but Variety could be getting wrapped around him by a Millsy. Meanwhile, Trickstank is fighting against Maniac. Ult for ult exchange, and Maniac still doing good work on the front line. Trickstank showed his back to the rest of Obey, and it got blown off by Pretty Prime in the backlash. Now Variety with no ultimate. He's finally been collapsed on, surrounded, and he'll fall down too. And Obey still 5 members strong.
And with the entire front line down for the side of Team Dignitas, there's not really much of a route for these squishy characters to try and get in for contesting this FG.
Zeros has no beads for another 6 or 7 seconds, so has to stay far back. Arkill, the first one to turn up on the Apollo, now trading with Ataraxia. Support from Emilsy's there to block some of these shots, but the deal does not happen. Obey secure it with the Earth Shaker coming out from Pretty Prime, and now Arkill going to be chasing the tower. No one cares about Tower aggro here. There's 2 tanky targets. Arkill falls, Fire Giant on all 5 members of Obey.
And Arkill expended both of his actives there, so now while Obey are looking for these tower sieges, not only is Arkill not going to have his actives by the time that he respawns, but also Obey are certainly going to be looking for him inside of that back line. Zeros doesn't have beads, so they're both really prime targets for the circuit at this point in time.
And right now, I mean, Dignitas, they could lose this game, and this makes Obey even within the points after game 1. It could change in game 2, though, as now the fight under the Phoenix begins. Cubo Fred forced out by the ultimate by Twig. Twig got a lot of aggro there, though. Nice backfire again from Prime. God, he's been on point today as Pretty Prime. Talking about being on point, Ataraxia lands all 3 of those in a row to the back of Cubo's head. Juggling aggro well at Obey, but so are Dignitas and holding the Phoenix for now. Prime's meatball will remove Trickstank back to the base for now, and pulled into danger is Captain Twig. He'll fall, as does the Phoenix.
And excellent engage by Obey to just really take their time with things. As soon as that Thoth ultimate connected onto 3 members of Obey, they just backed off, popped the meditation, and then immediately re-engaged. And that kind of pressure is exactly what you want to be doing onto Team Dignitas, because when the actives are down for their characters, we said it earlier, they don't have a whole lot of hard CC. So not having actives to use on their terms of defense underneath these Phoenix fights, that becomes incredibly hard for a team to try and outlive these longer engagements.
I'm looking back at this game, Taco, overall, and seeing what went wrong. And Dignitas invested everything to the solo side of the map, the right-hand side of the map. Obey invested everything to the duo side of the map, and they're the ones that have come out on top. Do we look back at the beginning of the game and where people started? Trickstack started mid, and we saw Kibo start solo. Should they have looked for the traditional 2-on-2 maybe, or have the jungler start mid instead of solo?
The way that Team Dignitas opted to start in comparison to the conventional one that we're used to seeing, I don't think that was their downfall factor. I think where things really went wrong for Team Dignitas is they just permitted too much freedom to Captain Twig to really jump onto this backline and abuse Zeros, especially on this Thoth pick, because Thoth, sure, he's got a really long dash, especially if you have your wall available to you and you can try and utilize that for an escape, but the commitment time and time again, Zeros just couldn't outlive it long enough, and he was just constantly being forced out of these fights. And so it almost felt as though Team Dignitas, even when somebody wasn't dead, because of how much pressure was being applied to Zeros, it almost felt like a 4v5.
I can feel that. I mean, when we talking about how they started on the right-hand side more than the left, I was thinking you're looking at Dignitas have more of a springboard from those roles that got ahead, and instead it didn't really happen for them. The springboard for Obey in the duo lane has really catapulted them, and Millsy and Ataraxia have been a very focal point to this game, and Prime really much went untouched in the mid lane.
Well, the problem as well is that if you're focusing getting a Sobek ahead, there's really not much for a Sobek to be doing. It's a Sobek. He's a peel factor. He's a heavy, like, he can be a heavy engage factor or a disengage, but he's not going to really be a carry factor, unlike a ROM or a Vulcan or a Circuit. And that is the primary difference here between Obey and Dignitas, is that Dignitas have carries, they have the Apollo, but an Apollo facing off into 3 potential hyper carries, that is just so much. It's so hard to try and deal with that.
Well, Dignitas against that Fire Giant that Obey had have managed to defend 2 of their 3 Phoenixes. The Portal Demon now dropped by Obey as they exit to go back, spend some of the gold they just earned, and make sure they're ready for the next siege at the Fire Giant, which will probably be the next one that we see the teams contest.
Certainly, and if I'm Team Dignitas too, looking for an engage underneath that FG becomes incredibly risky, because you have to really decide at this point in time, what ultimates are we going to expend, and are we going to utilize these ultimates for a steal, or are we going to try and utilize these ultimates for a pick?
It's basically Earthshaker versus Final Judgment is what I'm looking at. Toph versus Vulcan, who's going to get the big old Toph?
And if you're Vulcan, that trade is almost always favorable towards you, because Vulcan has the turret, he has the meatball, and he's got his kit is just perfect for objective secure. And meanwhile, Thoth, you just have your ultimate, and should Obey disengage off of the FG at the right time, or just force Zeros to use his ultimate in a way that he wouldn't want to, like trying to peel off Captain Twig or something, it's just... Thoth has a lot less unconfirmed damage than a Vulcan in this kind of scenario for objective fights.
Well, the dance has begun around the Fire Giant. Portal Demon not available right now. War coverage is favoring Obey. Maniac to the forefront again, trying to channel him through into a nice little gap. The problem is that Zeros can fire through that gap, as you saw there, and Maniac doesn't want to have too much to do with that if he can help it. Twig clearly looking on the left-hand side of your screen there towards Cuvo Fred and trying to wrap around the back, but Medjai's versus Medjai's, they're both going to eat a CC easily for the time being.
Captain Twig trying to ensure that his Medjai's doesn't get popped immediately. A little bit easier for Cuvo to force out his Medjai's than what it is for Twig to pop Cuvo's, and so that could really go either way, but these two just are trying to deter the other from wrapping around that left-hand side to try and pick up a back line fight, because if Twig gets into the backline, like we see him doing right now...
And there we go, straight onto Arkill. Arkill dashes away to safety. Maniac diving in. The Vulcan ultimate will hit Variety, not kill him, but drop him very low. Arkill brought back into danger off Pretty Prime, and he'll pick up that kill. Ataraxia in the sky was looking for cleanup crew if he could find it, but it wasn't really required. Maniac getting very low, but the Meditate will keep him alive. Cuvo wrapping around the back here. Could help out Dignitas, but Trixtank's already dead to the hands of Twig. And now Ataraxia has found Cuvo, and he's already used the Aegis as well. Cuvo's going to fall to Ataraxia. This could be game right now, Taco. Obey have just shredded them. They didn't even need the Fire Giant here by the looks of it.
And Variety, last member standing on the side of Team Dignitas, but it's a Sobek. Sobek just doesn't have the kind of damage that you would need to face off against this Obey roster. And just like that, Variety's going to fall, and next will be the Titan.
And that's a big game there for Obey to win as well. They were behind Dignitas by 1 point coming into this set. This